Good afternoon and welcome to the September 18th, 2024 City Council work session. Thank you so much for joining us in this virtual meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling in to one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And thank you again for joining us. And with that, I call this September 18, 2024 City Council work session to order, and we'll turn it over to the city manager to introduce the first topic about the airport terminal renovation.
Thanks, Mayor. Super excited to be talking about terminal renovation and expansion, and joined by our airport director, Catherine Stevens, who's going to walk us through this presentation. Looking forward to it. And we'll be flying out of there on Saturday morning.
Oh, very good. Love to hear that. Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen. And also, could you confirm for me that we have our consultant guest speakers?
Yeah. Hi, Jeff Sweeney's here.
Perfect. Okay. So there we go. All right, Mayor Vennis, Council President Keating, and councilors, good afternoon. Thanks for having me here today. I'm Catherine Stevens, the airport director at the Eugene Airport, and I'm going to provide you with a brief update on the terminal renovation and expansion plans at the airport. This presentation, we will be talking about giving several updates on capital improvement projects that were completed since I last presented to you on the Advanced Terminal Planning Study in February of 23. It will also provide an overview on, oops, sorry about that. My slides are forwarding on their own. We were just talking about this, Mayor Vennis. Our devices are having a mind of their own. So we'll also be providing an overview on a recently completed economic impact study for EUG, a reconfirmed passenger demand forecast, 2 new grant opportunities that will support a phased approach to the terminal expansion, and an update on a rough order of magnitude cost estimates for the EUG TREX project. TREX is just what we're calling it now, but we're looking for new creative names for this major expansion initiative. So this spring, airport staff contracted with Martin Associates to conduct a comprehensive economic impact analysis for EUG. Martin Associates is an internationally recognized leading economic and transportation consulting firm that has conducted similar economic impact studies at many other airports, including Portland International Airport. And joining us virtually today is Jeff Sweeney and Mike Sarbaugh, who will provide an overview of the results of the economic impact study for the Eugene Airport's current activity and under a terminal expansion scenario. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn over the presentation to our consultants. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for the introduction. I'm trying to just get my screen up here 1 second. This might take me a minute. I'm sorry. Share screen. And I want to have Eugene Airport presentation. It should be good. Let me get this back up here. I'm sorry. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thanks for your introduction, Catherine. And yeah, we were just a little background, very quick. Martin Associates, we've been in the transportation consulting industry now for 35 years. I've been with the company for about 30 years. Mike Sarbaugh, who was really the director of research and ran all the models on this, has been with the company for 20 years. And we specialize in airport and seaport planning studies, economic impacts. We've done work for PDX. We've done work for SeaTac and other airports in the West Coast. We do work for the ports of Seattle and also Portland, and also those on the river. So we have a lot of history in the Pacific Northwest. And we were doing some work at for Maryland Department of Transportation with Landry & Brown, and one of our clients there was retiring from the state and going with Landry & Brown, and they called us up and said they needed an economic impact done in Eugene, and That's how we married up with Catherine and staff, and we're able to put this together over the summer. So we just finished this, I believe, in August, and Mike finalized it, I think, in early September. But I'll just go through very quickly our process and the results and the potential impacts of the TREX project moving forward. So we will look at the baseline economic impacts. So we looked at the 2023 passenger and cargo activity at EUG, and we'll show the impacts in terms of jobs, wages, revenue, and taxes. And then in addition to that, we also build a sensitivity model, which allows us to look at increases in passenger levels, new service, any international or domestic passengers, flight levels, trip purpose, things along those lines. So exactly what you're looking at in terms of doing a concourse renovation, with TREX and looking at additional gates and additional volumes is certainly something that we can look at in our sensitivity model, and that's exactly what we did. Our methodology is really an interview intensive approach. We conducted 18 interviews with the airlines, the concessionaires, the rental cars, and so forth, any of the stakeholders that are out at the airfield. That feeds right into our direct impacts, our direct job numbers, and we had a 94% response rate, which is very high. In terms of the visitor side, the visitor impacts, when passengers are coming into the area, we didn't do a passenger survey, but we were able to look at the Travel Oregon statistics, the visitor profiles from their statewide report, and we were able to glean, the passenger characteristics, and we were able to apply those to the visiting passengers in conjunction with interview survey data from the airlines, primarily United and Southwest. Obviously, we received airport data from Catherine and staff on the number of operations and for passengers and cargo, the fixed base aircraft, airport administration, jobs, payroll, capital expenditures, things along those lines. Then from there, we build our induced and indirect models, and that's kind of what you hear of as being the spin-off effect. So you have jobs that are created, and there's a spin-off. We developed those specifically to state of Oregon and to Eugene, so they're not national models. They're specific to your local region. And just to give you an overview of how that all works, this is a nice little chart that we've used for many years, which kind of shows you the flow of the impacts. So you have your airport activity, which generates a business revenue. And from that business revenue, there are direct jobs. There's a payroll that's paid, and there's direct jobs going on the left-hand side. There's also some retained earnings and investments and reinvestment of that revenue. But then on the other side, you also have local purchases for supplies, contracted services, utilities, things along those lines. They create your indirect jobs. Your induced job holders, then they go out and spend money on food, clothing, entertainment, housing, and that respending of that income is your consumption respending, which creates the induced jobs. So you're looking at direct, induced, and indirect jobs, and then ultimately they all pay state and local taxes, which we've had figured in here as well. So when you look at the summary of 2023 and what we're looking at, it's about 10,400 jobs are supported by the airport activity. 6,700 of those are direct, 2,379 are induced, and then almost 1,300 indirect jobs. When you look at personal income and consumption from those job holders, you're looking at $441.6 million. In terms of taxes, you're looking at about $82 million to local Eugene and also the state of Oregon in terms of local taxes paid by individuals and also those paid by the federal government in terms of aviation-specific taxes. Then in addition to that, there's also related impacts that are generated with users of air cargo. We kind of keep those impacts separate because that can fluctuate greatly on the amount of cargo that's moving through, the volume, the composition, what industries are being served. But as an aside, there's another almost 2,000 jobs that are on the related side with businesses that are shipping cargo through the airport. And when you look at the two sides of this, when you look at those 10,383 jobs, you can see the breakout of the direct, induced, and indirect. And you can also see it in the left-hand column by airport generated, that's on site. That would be your airlines, your rental cars, airport administration, TSA, concession providers, retailers. Then your visitor industry is a much larger number. And that's really due to all the origin destination visiting passengers that are coming in of that 1.3 million passengers that you had. And you're creating about 6,000 direct jobs there, in total about 9,100. So the majority is on the visitor side, but when you're looking at the airport side and those that are generated due to the activity, another 1,226 jobs. And similarly, you can see the breakout of the income, the $441 million in income. You can look at the business revenue there, $1.2 billion in business revenue. Local purchases of 105 million, the state and local taxes of 42, and then the federal aviation taxes of 39 million. So they're pretty healthy impacts, for the smaller airport like Eugene in comparison to like larger, PDX and CTAX. Not to say you're a smaller airport, but just in terms of relative size. If you want to just look at the breakdown of those direct jobs, so this is the direct jobs on the first top left-hand number, the airport direct jobs. These are the jobs that the folks are showing up every day to the airport. You have 114 with the airlines. The federal government has in there 85. That's your tower and your TSA employees. There's 69 EUG administration folks that are there. Retail concessions, the fixed-based operators, and some miscellaneous job holders and parking and so forth. CC 447 jobs. The freight transportation sector gives you another 26 jobs. And then ground transportation, rental cars, taxis, limos, vans, ride share, that type of thing is 185 jobs. Construction, 113 jobs. That's based off of the capital expenditures that we get from the airport. So in total, there you have 771 total jobs broken out by employment sector. And furthermore, when you look at this, about 95% of the jobs are held by local residents of Eugene and Lane County, which is important, I think, when you're trying to show the impact on the community, that these folks are coming from local, jurisdictions. You have a 3.6% coming from Lynn, and then another 1.3 coming from other Oregon, but primarily they're all held by local Eugene and Lane County residents. So that, what I just showed you, was the baseline for 2023. So then what we did as part of our analysis was we said, well, let's look at the Concourse C development or TREX project and see, what are the impacts if you don't do the construction and development, how many jobs are at risk and what type of economic activity is at risk. So we were able to get the planning study conducted by RS&H, which has passenger and cargo throughputs projected out. That study justifies the need for 8 new gates. So we took our sensitivity model that I described early on, and we were able to plug in the 2032 and 2042 passenger forecasts and then develop the economic impacts of those. So what you can see here is just at the top, looking at the annual and plane passengers. So right now we're about 860,000, projected to go to 1.1 million in 2023, and then nearly 6 million in 2032 and 2042. So you're looking at almost a doubling of passengers over the next 20 years. And on the left-hand side, I have the same table laid out that you saw before. So you're looking at if you can't expand and we're capped at threshold of what we're at right now, that additional would be another 4,500 jobs, $317 million in revenue, 177 million in income, and then about another almost $20 million in taxes. And similarly, and I have to close this down because your faces are over here on the other side here. If you look at 2042, you're talking about 13,000 jobs that would be at risk or wouldn't be realized if the project didn't go through. $515 million of income, another $923 million of revenue, and then state and local taxes of about 55.7 million. So very significant impacts. You can see it's almost a doubling because you know, when you go from 860,000 passengers to 1.5, almost 1.6 million, you're really doubling the size of the facility there with this TREX project. So that's all the slides I had. I just wanted to kind of make it brief and get to the point so we can answer any questions. You know, Mike is on the phone and he did all the work on this. I was just kind of the project manager, but Mike really, did all the interviews and did all the modeling. So we can, take any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you so much. I'm gonna zip over to the gallery view really quick just to see if I do see any questions, but we can also just keep going through the presentation. If you can stay through the end, that would be great. And then
Sure.
counselors would have the opportunity to answer questions or ask questions at that point.
I'll stop sharing.
All right, I don't see any raised hands, so I think we will just continue on with.
You know what, Catherine, if you just hold it, it looks like Randy Groves has a question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, my buttons are sticky today too. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Jeff, for the presentation. I think I know the answer, but I just want to clarify. When we're looking out to 2032 and 42, are those adjusted for inflation as well? Or is this just carrying forward today's dollars?
It's just carrying forward today's dollars.
Great. So it'd actually be more than that then. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Yep. Correct.
Okay, it looks like Councilor Mike Clark has a question as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I was wondering if at any point any of your figures break down the difference between state and local tax dollar flow, just because from our perspective as city council, there's a fairly significant difference between taxes that flow to the state as opposed to
Sure.
local jurisdiction.
Believe we have that, Mike. I'm looking to put that in the report. We were able to get the information from Bureau of Census. They have a breakdown of state and local government finances that we use. So, Mike, do you have that number? Do you happen to know the percentage?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can give you a breakdown of the state versus local percent wise. And I can forward that to Catherine and Patricia and get that to you.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yep, we do have it. Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, all good.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, Catherine, I think you're free to go. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I will continue on with my presentation then and share my screen again. Okay. And for the slides, there we go. Okay. So now I'm going to give you an overview of our airport capital improvement program, several of the projects that have been completed since I last presented at council work session in February of 23. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly just for time to provide an overview of those completed projects and then also the next projects in the queue. But if you do have questions along the way, just let me know. So what you're seeing here on this side, this L configuration, that's the new 5-position aircraft remote heavy pad constructed last summer. 2 positions are currently being utilized by our airline partners to park aircraft overnight, which are then repositioned in the morning as other early morning flights depart. The full heavy pad can also accommodate very large aircraft like 777s. And this area is eventually planned to become part of the C Concourse apron. Also last summer, the Charlie Mike taxiway pavement was rehabilitated and reconfigured to remedy what the Federal Aviation Administration designated as a hotspot A hotspot is an area of potential confusion for pilots navigating aircraft movement areas using signs and markings on the airfield. So now we have no hotspots on our airfield, so that's very good as far as safety. We added electric preconditioned air units to all 6 of our jet bridges in Concourse A. This improvement means that airlines no longer need to utilize diesel-powered units to provide heated or cooled air to the aircraft cabin while parked at the gate, and this represents a large reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. A cover was constructed on the pedestrian walkway that connects the economy parking lot to the main parking lots, which provides additional covered walking area for our passengers utilizing that parking area. A rental car quick turnaround facility was finished last fall, replacing the antiquated car wash adjacent to the short-term parking lot. The new facility is located adjacent to the rental car overflow parking area, which provides improved efficiencies for the car rental agencies. And the new facility features several environmental sustainability improvements, including water reclamation and solar panels. We're tracking the performance of the solar energy generation to help inform future potential solar installations at EUG. This summer, an obsolete passenger loading dock was removed at gate B2. Markings were realigned to accommodate the larger aircraft that are now utilizing gate B3, which now allows for all 3 B gates to be in operation at the same time again. And the taxiways onto the air cargo apron were widened this summer to accommodate larger aircraft, including aircraft utilized by Big Ten teams. Markings are scheduled to be completed later this fall. And projects up next in the queue include wetland mitigation at the end of the runway 34 right runway safety area. This project is needed to reduce wildlife hazard risk on that aircraft approach. A ditch and culvert system will be the first part of the project in hopes of moving the standing water out of that approach area naturally. Wetland mitigation will be next if the first approach doesn't work. And our very old rotating beacon will be replaced with new LED technology. The new location for the placement of the beacon aligns with the planned build out of a new air traffic control tower as identified on our airport development plan. An airfield storage facility is currently in design. Our current airfield maintenance shop and snow removal equipment buildings are at capacity. The new storage facility will house maintenance equipment. That equipment is currently being housed outside, so being able to bring it inside will help preserve the life of that equipment. So unless there are questions on those projects, I will move on to the reconfirmed passenger demand forecast and the projects related to the terminal renovation and expansion. I can't see a raised hand, so I'll leave it to you, Mayor Venus, to let me know if there are questions at this time.
Yeah, I'm not, let's see, I have to open up participants to see. I don't think so, and I think it's better just to go through the whole presentation.
You bet. Okay, so this eye chart is, it shows a reconfirmation of our passengers, the forecast coming up. So earlier this year, airport staff worked with RS&H, which is our architecture and engineering firm of record, to present a refined passenger forecast to planners at the FAA Seattle Airports District office. The goal was to provide a comparison of the 2022 Advanced Terminal Planning Study forecast to the 2023 FAA Terminal Area forecast, which is what you're seeing on this slide. This reconfirmation of the aviation forecast with FAA airport planners at the Seattle ADO provided an additional layer of assurance that the ATP study base case remains accurate. And this means planning for annual enplanements reaching more than 1.3 million passengers in 2037. That represents a significant increase from 2023 passenger enplanements at just under 860,000 passengers. So that's a projected 54% increase in passengers by 2037. The additional 465,000 enplaned passengers and the commercial service needed to serve those passengers cannot be accommodated in the existing terminal facility, which, as you know, is currently at full capacity. So up next is the terminal renovation and expansion plans. This is a refinement of the advanced terminal planning study from a couple of years ago. We've developed a phased approach mainly to try to manage the budget impact to the Airport Capital Improvement Program and take advantage of additional federal grants. 2 new federal funding opportunities have been identified for 2 phases of the project. These are considered enabling projects toward an eventual Concourse C expansion. So if received, these grants will significantly reduce the amount of needed city financing for the Concourse C expansion. We'll talk about these phases here. So the first new federal grant funding opportunity that we have applied for is through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Airport Terminal Program, or ATP grant program. The existing Concourse A hold room is undersized for the current aircraft fleet mix that's being utilized by our airline partners currently. And as I've mentioned, and as you've probably experienced for yourself, Concourse A is at capacity. This project adds approximately 5,400 square feet to an underutilized connector bridge as a central shared seating space for all of Concourse A gates. And this expansion also allows for the construction of an ADA emergency exit ramp that we don't currently have onto the airside, improving accessibility for all passengers. It also adds gender-neutral restrooms, upgrades to existing restrooms, new ADA-friendly flooring, a sensory room, upgrades to the HVAC system, and remodeling of adjacent spaces. So the cost estimate for this first phase is about $21.5 million. Those funding sources, again, are federal ATP, passenger facility charges, and local match, with an estimated construction completion of 2026. The grant status right now is with the FAA, and so everybody cross your fingers and toes, because we really would like to be able to move forward with this project using those ATP grant funds. And here is a rendering of what that finished space will look like. If you look to the right side of the rendering shows that that's where the existing Concourse A walkway is when you walk down to the A gates, just for some perspective there. And then the next phase project is the outbound baggage system. And this is a new federal grant funding opportunity through a Transportation Security Administration grant in tandem with multiple other funding sources, including a future application for another Bipartisan Infrastructure Law ATP program grant and an airport infrastructure grant. Officials with the TSA actually approached us with this grant opportunity. They've identified the current explosive detection system layout at the airport as insufficient, and it doesn't meet the current needs of the TSA at EUG. So we've entered into what's called an other transaction agreement, or an OTA, with the TSA for the allocable design components for a new EDS system. This project includes the design and construction of the building facilities to support the new fully inline EDS system. Specific components could include the building shell, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, civil site improvements, new apron pavement, utility improvements, stormwater improvements, a really large project that also comes with a large price tag. The cost estimate for this project is $62 million. And again, those funding sources are multiple. So TSA OTA grant, federal bill funds, federal ATP funds, passenger facility charge funds, and local match, with hopefully, if those funding sources come through, an estimated construction completion of 2027. So right now, the grant status is that the TSA OTA is approved for design only for $1.4 million, and that is in process. Okay, and so then that moves us on to the C Concourse expansion. Concourse A expansion and the outbound baggage system project cost estimates make up about $83.5 million of the greater EUG TREX project. Utilizing this phased approach, and of course, very dependent on the competitive grants being awarded to the city, this brings the cost of the C Concourse build out to a rough order of magnitude of about $117.5 million. So staff will continue to refine project costs and determine the need for additional financing as more information is known, including total project costs, the amount of grant funding awarded, and overall cash flow needs. Additional council work sessions will be scheduled to provide expansion plan updates and financial considerations. All right, I moved through that pretty quickly, but I am ready to answer questions. I think you're on mute, Mayor Venice.
Sticky button, sorry. I did move it through quickly, but I did want to thank you because I know you offered us all tours and I had a tour. And so even though this was fast, I'd had a lot of time with you to actually see it on the ground. So I appreciate that very much. And it looks like Matt Keating has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And Catherine, thank you for the presentation and for opening up the airport to personal tours. It's greatly appreciated. Good to see you in the virtual space. Before I get to my questions, long term about potentially, and we've talked about this in person, potentially partnering with LTD for increased transit options and exploring solar opportunities at the airport. I'm honing in on the baggage expansion plan, and something that maybe it's because explosives are in the news, but your point about the FAA determining that our explosive detection system is insufficient is cause for concern. My question is the baggage expansion plan the top priority? If not, why not? And if funds don't come in the way from the feds the way we expect, would that baggage expansion plan rise to the top of the crop if we had to scale down the investments at the airport?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Councilor Keating. And so I'm looking back at my notes. So the TSA is the TSA, and it's inefficient. So it's not ineffective; it's inefficient. And that the reason for that is because right now they have 3 different pods where their agents do the screening, and that's 5 different machines. And so it's just inefficient from a standpoint of instead of having one room where all of the screening agents could be in that room, instead they're being spread around to these different workspaces. It's inefficient in that way. It is not unsafe and it's not ineffective. It's just inefficient.
Yeah, I really appreciate the clarification. Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, I know it's not necessarily part of the expansion proposal, but I was excited when we chatted in person about the prospects of increasing the alternative transportation footprint, kind of a return to form, in that this airport, which is a gem, and I love traveling out of our airport, but it's the only airport of this size in the nation I've traveled to where there's a real lack of public transportation. Could you touch on the prospects of partnering with LTD in the future, please?
Sure. And, I have to agree. It's just really a frustration for us as well. As you know, we did a pilot program a few years back that was a partnership between the airport, LTD, and LCC. And that served the student population at LCC at the aviation school well. The alignment of schedules did not work well for either passengers, airline passengers, or aviation workers, mainly because LTD starts later in the day. A lot of our workers need to be here at 3 a.m. A lot of them stay very late till 1 a.m. So that was a frustration, but I still agree. We should have public transportation to our airport. I know that LTD is looking at that. Again, I'm happy that they are, things are under consideration, but again, that is a decision for LTD to make. In the meantime, we've tried to do some other things like working with a shuttle company to have at least service between the 2 universities and the airport. my understanding is that shuttle service also, it feels like they're not making it, and they're going to be ending that service in October, which is unfortunate. So we will continue to look for these additional transportation options at the airport. And I'm open to all new ideas too, if people have other ideas about how to make that happen.
Thank you. Well, I continue to be an enthusiastic partner to help see that to come to fruition. And then finally, is it pie in the sky that there could be a solar farm located on or around our airport facilities, our airport grounds?
Not pie in the sky. Absolutely not. I think we're well on our way to doing some of the smaller projects that will inform larger projects. There are a couple of grant opportunities that I think you may be hearing about soon that will be able to help us move forward some electrical vehicle charging and solar projects at the airport. As you know, it's kind of the baby steps, right? Because we want to make sure that if we do an installation, it will be successful. And having had a failed project before, we've put in solar on the QTA facility. That's going to be a good read. And then these other couple of potential projects coming soon will also inform that. So yeah, there are certainly solar arrays at other airports. And I think that that's something that we definitely want to explore, but we want to make sure we're getting good data to make good decisions.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Always good to see you.
Good to see you.
Appreciate all you do.
Thank you. Alan.
Thanks, Mayor. Great presentation, Catherine and Mike and Jeff. A lot of work has gone into this. A couple questions. One on the solar. I know most of what you're talking about is rooftop solar or pathway solar or parking lot solar for that. With regard to a larger project in the megawatt size that surrounds the area, I know there two things about that. One is that used to be totally not feasible for two reasons. One, cost, but the cost have dropped dramatically. I mean, this isn't your grandfather's solar anymore. It's actually one of the most cost-effective things that you can do in the electrical generation business is doing solar and wind. Far outstrip all the other types of resources, and adding batteries makes them very effective. But the other reason was in the past, there was a lot of glare associated with them and interfering with takeoffs and landings. And I know that technology's advanced too, so that's less of a problem. But is that still an issue, or have you guys investigated that?
Yeah, so definitely
there's a lot of buffer land around the airport.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, definitely the solar panel technology has come a long way. And I think that's why FAA has acknowledged they no longer have to sign off on our solar glare studies. We do still have to do a solar glare study, but they don't control it as much anymore, just because they've also acknowledged it's not as much of an issue. I think more than that, the reason we want to have a couple of these smaller projects under our belt is because, and I've talked about this before, we sit in fog for much of the winter out here, and and even if the city, downtown is not in fog, we are. And so often in the winter, we're in fog all the way till 3 p.m. and then it's dark at 5 p.m. And so we want to know that the technology has come a long ways enough that we will still see a good return on investment out here, specifically at this site.
Yeah, and that's probably right for a public-private partnership where we don't own the solar panels, but we buy the output and have it be on our land. But yeah, you're right. The Willamette Valley Tule fog is pretty famous, if not infamous. The second question I had related to the future. My nephew, when he got out of school, ended up working for an autonomous electric air taxi company in the San Diego area, and so I know there's lots of talk about that. They're going to be deploying them in Southern California probably next year, so that's not that far off. But that's something that we need to think about in the future. That, along with alternative fuels. I know Alaska's been doing biofuels for a long time in their planes, and other people have been experimenting with it as well, and there's been zero problems with it. So I'm learning how that infrastructure is getting thought about in terms of planning. So electric planes and biofuel planes.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's going to happen. I've been down to the Joby facility in Marine, California, and I've seen one of these electric vertical and takeoff aircraft fly. It's pretty impressive, and they're very, very quiet is the other thing. So it will happen, and definitely, you know, what that rollout looks like exactly, we don't know. FAA did just put out a vertiport spec just this week. We included eVTOL planning in our advanced terminal planning a couple of years ago, just to start thinking about it. And so those are things that we look at, you know, definitely we'll be, you know, queuing up for another master planning project in the next couple of years. That will be a definite piece of where do we site, you know, a vertiport, or how do we utilize space that we already have and make that transition, because we are going to get there eventually, but there'll be those many years of transition, probably decades of transition, where we have traditional aviation and electric aviation and perhaps hydrogen, right?
Yeah, what about the biofuel storage and pipelines and all that? Is that going to be, and electric, is that going to be integrated into the C expansion?
Well, so what we'll want to do is, so there'll be a little bit of overlap here. There'll be, you know, the C concourse planning, but we'll also have a master planning process at some point that will overlap, just because we need to do that process about every 5 to 10 years. So all of that will be integrated. Of where do you put these things? How do you get the electric grid infrastructure? How do you get the alternative fuels infrastructure? You know, is it going to be hydrogen? Is it going to be some other sustainable aviation fuel? Lots of good questions that they're on our radar and will be included in our future planning. But we don't necessarily have all the answers yet.
Yeah, we just don't want to preclude them by doing something that would preclude them. But also vertiport, hadn't heard that before. So building word power with Catherine Stevens. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Emily and then Randy.
Thank you. Just a few technical difficulties. I don't have any questions. I just want to say this is so very exciting. And Greg has his phone on and my things don't have a microphone, so you're hearing us twice. Our city's growing, you know, whether we want to realize it or not. We're going to be a big city. And we're on the corridor, Seattle, LA, San Diego. We need a bigger airport. We all know Concourse A is really crowded. So I just want to say that I appreciate so much work. I know it's been going on a long time, and you did a big revision of the plans. So I really appreciate the way you've taken care of us and taken care of this city and our future needs and the care that you put into it. I'm thrilled with the idea of some solar, and it would be great to not have to drive myself to the airport. So just thank you, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Thank you so much, Councilor Semple. And yeah, you're right. We're going to become bigger. But a lot of it, and I know I've talked to several of you about this, is we still have 29% of our passengers, our local catchment area passengers, that are driving to PDX. And that's really my goal, is to pull those folks back off the highway and have them be able to utilize their local airport. But we can't do that if we're already at full capacity, right? Which is why we're here talking about an expansion.
I really appreciate that. I forget about that because I won't do it. You know, I'll take more layovers to not have to go to Portland and drive back. So that's a really good point. And I appreciate that. And I guess we might have to expand further in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Randy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Catherine, for the presentation. I agree with what Emily was saying. Kudos to you and the work of your team on this project. My family and I frequently use the Eugene Airport, and yes, we definitely need some growth room. pants are getting a little tight. So anyway, I look forward to that. Confirming, we're now an Index C airport, correct?
We are an Index C, although, like any kind of growing pains, it looks like we're going to go back and forth for a while. And so I've been, talking with, our Eugene Fire partners around this, and they do understand it's $1 million a year, right, to go up an ARF index. That's just today's number. So I anticipate that we will go back and forth probably for 3 to 5 years, depending on what the airlines are doing. Depending if Boeing starts delivering aircraft again, that would be super helpful. Good news that came out today is Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines are merging. I think that's going to be great for us. So watch for that.
Super. With that said, how do we compare? How do we benchmark against similarly situated, well, I'll say Index B and C airports, as far as our growth curve is going or projected to grow?
So are you talking specifically about ARF index or in general, just the size of our airport?
I'm talking about passenger growth.
So we have been on a pretty swift growth pattern for the past, coming out of the pandemic, essentially. So we blew through our 2019 passenger numbers, which was a record year. We blew through that in May of 21. We were fully back to normal, and then we just kept going. So we have gained 41% more passengers since 2019 over the past 4.5 years. We've regained 14% from PDX of our local passengers. And right now we are flat, but we also had a really big year last year. And so considering all of the struggles our airline partners are having getting aircraft delivery and some hard decisions that they've been having to make around pulling down routes because they just don't have aircraft to add as they were planning. We've talked to some of our airline partners where they had planned, like one airline gave us the example of they had planned 280 something new routes and they were down to about 80 just because of that constraint. So I think considering all of that, we're doing pretty well to be just holding steady from where we were last year.
Okay, great. And believe it or not, I wasn't even thinking about ARF when I was asking about indexes. I spent a lot of my life thinking about that, but now I'm more concerned about how we move people. And I know when we talk to businesses that are thinking about locating here, being able to get in and out of Eugene is always, top of their mind. So, whatever we can do to make this happen and speed it along, I feel like we're already behind the curve a little bit. And again, that's not a criticism of you or your staff. These are big capital moves that need to be made. But I think at this point, we need to keep moving with purpose, which I feel like we are now, but it just still seems like so far out until Concourse C can really be a reality. Do we have interim accommodation plans as we grow? I like the idea of having that extra pad put in where we can cycle aircraft through that maybe aren't first up in the morning and tug them in. But do we have other plans to kind of stopgap measures as we go?
Yeah, so we, that's part of this phased approach now is trying to get a little relief valve with expanding the Concourse A seating area because it is just so constrained right now, as you know. So that's why we put that one first. Very dependent on that federal ATP program grant. We have a congressional letter of support for that. We're hoping to hear probably October, November range if we are awarded some or all of what we've asked for in that grant application. The outbound baggage system, it's, TSA has already said, hey, we're going to give you this money. Very expensive project. And they will pay for what is allowable, but there's a lot of infrastructure around it that we will have to pay, which is why you see so many different potential funding sources for that. Again, 2 of those additional funding sources are competitive grant. So we'll be applying for those. We'll be doing the same thing, asking for congressional support. but we may need to start looking at some other funding mechanisms, and we've been working with central finance on a plan for that.
Great, thank you. And then the last comment I wanted to make, I agree with Councilor Keating. Those periodic visits out there and being able to see in real-time 3D what you're talking about. It's one thing looking at a map; it's another thing actually being out there and visualizing the space. Those are, I don't think we need to do it all the time, but periodically, that's really helpful to me. That's one of the ways I learn and how I gain understanding of space and distances and whatnot. So thank you very much.
Sure, love having you all out, and we'll definitely make that an invitation at least annually.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Catherine, great presentation. I really appreciate all the information. I recognize the importance to our area of making sure that we have a competitively sized and airport with the capacity to serve folks, even though I've actually I haven't been on a plane since the summer of 2000. I got to fix that one day soon. But the last time I was on a plane was before 9/11. Yeah, you heard that right. With all of the reliance on the need for federal funding that this expansion requires, are we making use of the former chair of the Transportation Committee in the House that lives reasonably nearby as in any way? I'm just interested to know.
Well, so I know that Congressman DeFazio has kept ties with Representative Hoyle. I certainly meet with Representative Hoyle and her staff as well, and they were absolutely critical in getting that letter of support for this latest ATP competitive grant application. And so that was great. I think that keeping those ties are great. I haven't talked to Congressman DeFazio in a while, but would certainly be open to any ideas that he may have around additional funding that could come potentially from other funding sources in Congress.
Again, it was kind of a tangential question, but it was just a thought. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greg, were you trying to get in the queue? And welcome back, by the way. Happy to see you.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I was trying to get in the queue. I wanted to address one of the concerns that was raised by Councilor Keating. And by the way, Catherine, thank you for the presentation. Incredibly informative, and it looks like we're having positive horizons for our airport moving forward. But one of the things in terms of the LTD transportation of the airport is challenges are that, there are a number of flights that are going out and coming in, arrivals and departures outside of LTD service times. That's going to have to be expanded. Capacity is going to have to come to a tipping point where it makes sense, financial sense for LTD and or the Lynn Benton County Transit Agency to be able to have an intergovernmental agreement to be able to service the airport, both from Eugene and Corvallis. And part of our catchment also is including Douglas County, which a lot of people don't realize that people fly into Eugene to avoid having to travel from Portland Airport all the way down to Douglas County. So our service area is expanding and continuing to expand, but we need to hit a tipping point where it makes sense for LTD to run regular service out to the airport at times that coordinate with arrivals and departures of flights. And as arrivals and departures of flights increase, we're going to be able to effectively implement routing and service to the airport at that point. But we've been talking about this for years. I was on the LTD board for 7 years, and it was consistent that we would get inquiries from residents all over the place saying, look, can we, take the bus out there like you can in San Francisco or rail or whatever the case may be. But we just weren't big enough, and we just still do not have enough in terms of frequency and capacity to be able to justify routing and service to the airport on a regular basis. So, as we are increasing in size, as we're adding concourses, that is going to make us a difference in terms of the tipping point in which, it makes sense for local transit to be connected, to the airport on both sides, the Eugene Springfield side, as well as Albany and Corvallis.
Yep, thank you for that.
Thank you. I think I'm watching the clock and thinking we need to wrap this up, but I do want to ask one quick question, and and you don't need to give a long answer, and if you want to follow up with me later, that's fine. As we're talking about this, everything about this is exciting. It's so compelling, and yeah, I think I'm with my colleagues. It can't happen soon enough. The question I have is about arriving baggage. So would you remind me, that's not included in this plan, but there is another plan around baggage for arriving flights. Is that right?
Yeah, we're in pretty good shape for, we are in good shape for our current arriving baggage. But if you add 8 new gates, you're going to need to add some baggage. And that was in the advanced terminal planning study. So, like everything, it's going to be phased. But there is some thinking that if we add, the Concourse C with 8 gates, we're going to need to add at least 1 or 2 more bag belts at that claim at the same time.
Thank you. And I think with that, we need to wind this up and move on to our next. But really, Catherine, Mike, thank you so much for your work and your presentation. It's really, it's inspiring and promising, and we really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you again. And with that, I think we'll close out this item and move on to our next item.
Thank you so much. If you've got follow-ups, just, you know where to find me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. So I will turn it back over to City Manager to introduce this second item, the Stryker Field Park renaming.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually really excited about this next topic because it's really an intersection of 2 important projects, and the first of that being the long-awaited development of the park that was intended to be Stryker Field, but as a park. And I know many of you worked hard to put together the funding, including staff, to get that completed. It's an amazing park being well utilized by the neighborhood. But that intersects with also some very intentional work we've been doing between the city of Eugene and tribal governments to really strengthen those relationships. And I know, Mayor, you and I have done a lot of that along with the staff team that's working on tribal relations. So it's really fun to see this come forward as these 2 things kind of come together. And so with that, I'll just turn it over to Carolyn Burke, who is going to lead us through this discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's great to be here. My name is Carolyn Burke, and I'm the Parks and Natural Resource Planning Manager. And I am here to talk to you today about the renaming of Stryker Field Park. I will share my screen. So let's make sure I can move forward. Okay, can you see that all right? Great. So as you all know, Stryker Field is Eugene's newest community park. It just opened last fall. It is located in Northeast Eugene in this corner of our city. It is just off Grand Cayman Drive and north of Crescent Village. This air photo, we see Stryker Field in red here, gives some context as to how this area has changed over the last couple of decades. There has been a tremendous amount of residential development in the area, with single-family housing to the east and multifamily housing to the south, and additional development to the west. And it has changed a lot since we first envisioned how this park would be developed. So some of you may remember that when we first conceived of this, how this park would be used, we thought it would be a sports complex. 4J School District owns the adjoining property to the west, and we had conversations with them about kind of blending our properties together in order to have enough land to develop a sports complex. This was before a lot of this residential development was here. It seemed like a great location, and Stryker Field seems like a great name for a future sports complex. Stryker, for those of you who maybe don't know soccer that well, it's a position in soccer, kind of a forward position that scores a lot of goals. And so we thought that would be a cool name for this park. Fast forward to 2019, when we passed in 2018, we passed a bond measure that gave us funding to develop this park. This photo is showing just a drone shot looking at the park site pre-development, with the surrounding neighborhood and the Coburg Hills in the background. So once we had funding, we started talking to the neighborhood about how to design and develop this park. And what we heard loud and clear was that due to the amount of residential density in the area, people wanted a more traditional park that would serve kind of the day-to-day needs of the community, rather than a more specific activity-oriented sports complex. So we continued to engage the community, and we kind of collaboratively came up with a really well-supported design for the park that did reflect that the desires of the community to be more of a space where the community could come together and gather, and where we had a variety of amenities that would interest residents of all ages. And throughout that planning process, we also heard from the neighborhood that there was an interest in renaming the park to something that was more suited to its current function and configuration. So we, once we had our park design, we engaged the community again, and we modeled this naming process after a successful naming process for 3 downtown streets in the Riverfront District. It's consistent with our existing naming policy, and it worked well there. So we kind of adapted that to this project. And so there were several steps, the first of which was to accept nominations of names from the community. And so then we would vet those names and then put those names back out for a public vote. And we would identify the top 3 choices and then bring those choices back to City Council. But midway through our process, we added step 3, which is to consult with representatives of local tribes, because once we started soliciting name nominations, it became clear that there was definitely a community desire to honor local Indigenous groups and languages. And we wanted to make sure that we were being respectful and consulting with the tribes before landing on any specific name. So we added step 3 to the process, and we also took all of the different name nominations that had that intention of honoring Indigenous groups, and we put them into one category for our voting. And what that allowed is that we would, people were not voting on a specific name, but more for the intention. So this is how the voting shaped up. The green line on the left was the option to vote for a name recognizing local Native American groups and languages. So it's by far the top vote getter in this process. For those people that did select that, we also provided a question, not to necessarily select the name, but to indicate preferences of the 5 nominated names from the community that did honor Indigenous peoples. What were people's preferences? And what we found there is the top 3 were Kalapuya, which of course is a Native American tribe of the Willamette Valley, Ulali, which is the Chinook Wawa word for berry, and Umso, which is the Kalapuya word for it is good. So once we got to this step, we knew we needed to move on to step 3. And this is, as Sarah just pointed out, was really where we synced our process up with the larger city effort to work through this intergovernmental tribal relations effort to kind of formalize and more respectfully identify ways to develop relationships and work together. And so at this point, we kind of paused in our process. And in the meantime, we built a park. And so we have a placeholder entry sign for the park, which is Stryker Field Park, that can be changed out with a new name at any time. And we had our grand opening celebration around this time last year with about 800 people attending. And I'm going to take this opportunity to share with you some photos from that grand opening because it was really great, and will give you a good feel of the park if you haven't had a chance to see it yet. So it has a really large playground, and there's a lot of natural materials used in the playground. And they kind of inspire, they don't necessarily tell you how to use them, but they inspire a lot of creative play. So it's really fun to go out there and see how children are imagining to utilize these spaces. You can also see there's a really large picnic shelter on the right-hand side of that slide, which again encourages the community to come together, and it can be used for a variety of different purposes and different scaled events. More examples of these kind of fun places that are integrated into the playground using landforms. This is my favorite, I have to say. Seeing kids interact with these kind of humpy lumpies in the playground is just really fun. And there's places for kids to climb. So we have a variety of different structures for kids to scramble over depending on their age and skill level, and just a lot of fun. Of course, we have sand play, which is always really popular with the younger kids. And we have play opportunities for older kids too. So we've got pickleball courts, basketball. We have pétanque, which is, I'm told, kind of the French version of bocce ball. And there is actually a local club that provides free lessons and provides equipment at the sites. So again, really kind of catering to a lot of different age levels at this site. And also really maintaining that goal or reaching that goal of being a place where the community can really come together. So I also, as Sarah previously did, just want to acknowledge that, you know, a lot of neighbors worked for years on this project to bring it to fruition, as did the city council, really coming to the rescue of Stryker Field on a couple of occasions to add more funding to the park to allow this to happen. So it's been a long time and terrific collaborative effort. So in the spring of this year, we were ready to begin consulting with the tribes. And in April, we made a presentation to the Tribal Council of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And they were not only supportive, but really enthusiastic about the proposal to rename the park. And they asked us to work with their cultural resources staff. And so we had a follow-up with David Harrelson, who is the department manager. And he gave us a lot of insight and guidance, particularly into the 5 nominated names by the community. So he kind of helped us understand what might be appropriate choices there. We had an additional conversation with Peter Hatch, who works with cultural resources of the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. And likewise, he gave us good insight and input into those 5 community nominated names. So, based on that input that we received and the desires that were expressed through the survey, the community survey, we're here today to share a recommendation with you for the renaming of Stryker Field Park to Umso Park, which is Kalapuya for It Is Good. And if the City Council accepts this recommendation, we will move forward with a new sign for the park. We will update our website, of course, and we'll begin transitioning through our printed materials over time to make sure we have updated names. We also anticipate some interpretive information on the site, some signage that talks about Indigenous people and the languages to give some context to that name and kind of a little bit more robust interpretation there. And we would seek collaboration with the tribes on that effort too. So that's what I have. Thank you.
So much for that presentation. I did have an opportunity to go to that grand opening, and it was really delightful to see how the children were just all over the place, really excited about it. And so it is a beautiful addition, and I very much appreciate the effort to land on the right name here and on the appropriate name, and it's a great example of sort of building those relationships with tribal governments that we're so eager to do. So thank you for all that work. Are there questions or comments from councilors? Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was going to wait and see if anyone had questions. I just want to make a general comment, mostly just thanks to staff, like multiple staff departments have touched this project over the years. So thank you. I want a huge thank you to the Northeast neighbors who have just shepherded this program along and not given up and been patient and collaborative and just, I don't think this would have happened without their support and their board's support through all of this, as well as all the residents who came to so many meetings to talk about this and work through our different ideas. And we all didn't get what we wanted, but at the end, the process felt right. And we got something that's just truly amazing. I'm, you know, when I go to other parks, I'm like, wow, you know, Stryker is so amazing. I got to start learning a new name now, which is going to be hard. And I also want to thank my colleagues, especially Councillor Clark. There were, as Carolyn mentioned, some times where all of us were a little nervous. Maybe this wouldn't happen the way we had hoped. But at the end, we were able to accomplish so much by all of us working together. And it's just such a jewel up in North Eugene now. And we're just so happy to have it. And thank you to Carolyn and your colleagues that worked with us so closely on just being persistent. This has taken so much longer than I think any of us thought it would to get to this point. And it doesn't feel like it has been done until the name has been like on the sign and put up. And so it's just, it feels so rewarding to finally get to this space, to be able to like finish it up. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Alan.
Yeah, it ain't easy to build something. This has been going on for a long, long time. Mike and I started talking about this forever ago. Maybe you remember how long ago, but it's not easy. So congratulations to all the people that helped pull it together. I did get a chance to go over there. I didn't get to play in Humpy Lumpy. Next time I'll go over there and do that, but that looks pretty cool. I'm curious about the slide 8, which had the different names, Kalapuya names that or words that we were going to look at, and UMSO didn't win the poll. My personal favorite, Ulali, I really like that for a park name, but wondering how that conversation went and how you landed on UMSO.
Sure. Yeah. So the top kind of preference that was indicated was actually Kalapuya. And in our conversations with representatives of the tribes, you know, we recognize that Kalapuya is a fairly common name and a name used kind of throughout the Willamette Valley. And so it wouldn't do much to kind of establish this particular location. It felt a little bit too generic almost. And that is something that we strive for in our park names, is to have names that are kind of special, where you kind of know that place that is being referenced to. So yes, Ulali, I agree, is a great name for a park. It's the Chinook Wawa word for berry. And the only berries that exist on this site are blackberry, which we are trying to eradicate. And so it just didn't feel like it was really representative of the park either. And so UMSO is, it's unique. I think it does describe the park in a way. It is good. And there's a lot of positive energy in that word and in that place. And so yeah, that's how we got there.
Okay. I like UMSO. Martha Stewart for a good thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Lindsay and then Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Just echoing the positive sentiments from my colleagues. As a mom of young children young enough that they still love to play in all of our parks and playgrounds across our city, I just want to show some serious appreciation for the more natural elements and these, you know, the climbing pieces and the hill and the sand. I know my children love those natural elements. They're much more likely to be drawn to, like at Skinner Park, the most popular thing in the entire park is where kids bring in cardboard and slide down the little hill. That I don't know if that was designed to be that way, but it's definitely, you know, kids are just having the best time with those things. And so understanding that and really implementing that in a really serious big way at this park, I think is just incredible and insightful. And I would love to see elements like that just continuing to be put into all of our parks across our city. And yeah, well done. I love all of the community engagement. I love the name. I think it's great. So I appreciate all of the work that went into this.
Thank you. And Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say thank you to Carolyn for all the years of hard work on this. And I know I'm going to make you smile when I say a couple of things, at least one of which is that although I was out there last year, I didn't get to crawl on the humpy, lumpy area, but I will be sure to do that if I get out there again soon.
We could go together, Mike.
Right, there we go. As this park is actually in the north part of Ward 4 and not Ward 5, but I did have a chance to work with a lot of the neighbors who are friends, and there's a neighborhood association that this park resides in. It's the Northeast Neighbors that both encompasses parts of Ward 4 and parts of Ward 5, and so that's why I got involved, was the former chair of the Northeast Neighbors, who I think needs recognition in this as well. His name is Kevin Reed. And this simply would not have happened without his dogged determination. I'm sure I'm going to see Carolyn smile there a little bit, in the process of making sure that this stayed, responsive to neighbors in the course of its development and everything else. I really appreciate how well you worked, Carolyn, with the Neighborhood Association in that development. I do want to say that I was at last night's Northeast Neighbor meeting, as was my colleague, Councilor Keating, there too. and I did get pulled aside by a couple of neighbors after the meeting. And I just want to say this to who wanted to voice their displeasure at the naming process. It's also important to say that without the work of EWEB Commissioner John Brown and certainly former Mayor Tory, the land would not have been set aside for this. With their hard work needs community thanks as well. And I know that there were those who wanted to see one or both of them, specifically former Mayor Tory, recognized in the naming process as well. And I wonder if, Carolyn, you could speak to that in any way. Why is it that that wasn't considered as an alternative in the process?
Boy, I'm having to think back to the step one of this process where names were actually nominated.
One of the gentlemen who pulled me aside last night was on your nominating committee that you had of neighbors.
Well, that was just an internal staff committee. So, and this was in 2021. So I think everybody's memory is going to be a little bit fuzzy on that.
I'm sorry to bring up a downer with all of this. I
Sure.
had input from neighbors and I wanted to make sure that was relayed.
I would want to go back and look and see if that was even a nominated name, and what our criteria was through that vetting process.
All right. Thank you.
Carolyn, I don't know if it's helpful. I was on the committee too with
Yes.
Carolyn, and we did have some individuals named that were voted, like folks that were voted, and some of them fit the city requirements and some didn't. I don't remember. I also don't remember if those people were the specific people, but they had so few votes. I do remember that they didn't rise anywhere near the top of the list.
I was not a part of that committee, so I can't speak to, any of the reasoning involved there. I appreciate your saying so. Again, I apologize for bringing up something negative associated with this, but I had that input and felt a little strong. I felt strangely about the process myself, so I wanted to say something.
Okay, thank you for that. I think, the naming process is a tricky one, and this council has reviewed it and needed to review it. And we have a long list of individuals who could have something named after them and probably deserve it and haven't. And we have, as we're recognizing, a long history of human beings on this land who need to be recognized, whose presence has been intentionally erased. So it's a balancing act, I think, to recognize the diverse community and the longstanding history and the more recent history. And so it's probably always going to be a little bit imperfect, but I think this engagement effort is incredibly valuable, and we learn by going through that engagement process. So appreciate your frustration, Mike, and also appreciate the process that we went through. And with that, and I will say, with that, I think I'll turn it over to Council President to put a motion on the table.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of personal privilege. It was an honor to be at the opening of the park last year at this time, staffing my boss, Senator Manning, which is why I was at the Northeast Neighbors last night as well. Thank you for the shout out, Councilor Clark. And thank you for the presentation and the history in regards to how we thoughtfully name places, locations, points of interest throughout our community. With that, Mayor, move to adopt the resolution attached as Attachment D, titled "A Resolution Renaming Stryker Field Park to UMSO Park."
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 4, 5, 6, 7. I count 7, and that's only because I can't see Greg's hand. 8. There we go. Thank you so much. That passes unanimously. And I just want to say that I do love the name UMSO Park, and it lends itself to sing-song little chants. It lends itself to different kinds of, so, I mean, you could do something, it just lends itself to joy. So it's a wonderful word, and I'm glad that it has now become part of our local vocabulary. So thank you, or become again part of our local vocabulary. And so thank you very much for that work, and thank you, council, for your support for it. And I think with that, we are adjourned. Have a good afternoon, everyone.